Good evening to all of our viewers. We would like to discuss a very important, if not fundamental topic of Jewish thought, and that is the transition from alienation to reconciliation. Of course, we're referring to the last 5 parashas of Sefer Shmos, Truma, Tetzaveh, Kisiso. The Torah has devoted 5 sections to the commandment to build the Mishkan in the desert, as well as the fulfillment of the Jewish people who indeed built the Mishkan in the desert, and through that, there was a total reconciliation between eternity and temporality, between the Kadosh Baruch Hu and Bnei Yisrael. That at one time, in the middle, we had the Chet HaEgel, and the Chet HaEgel, which was idolatry, caused a tremendous estrangement and alienation between the Jewish people and the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And the question, of course, is that if indeed the Jewish people became defiled through something which we really don't understand, the Chet HaEgel, but it was idolatry. So how is it that they achieved atonement? The Kadosh Baruch Hu indeed said on Yom Kippur, we'll just chronologically retrace these 5 parashas according to Rashi. They're out of order. Truma, Tetzaveh, Kisiso, Vayakel, Pekudei are basically out of order, because the Chet HaEgel, says Rashi, took place on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the 17th day of Chodesh Tammuz, which was 40 days after the Jewish people reached their highest madrega, the finest hour. They said Nasa v'Nishma, they accepted the Torah on the 6th day of Sivan, and subsequently 40 days later, somehow or other, something which we don't understand, it's totally mysterious, the Jewish people defiled themselves, and this caused an alienation and estrangement to them and the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And 80 days later, on Yom Kippur, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, V'yayim Hashem solachti kidvarecha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu granted atonement. Of course, the concept of atonement is not that difficult to understand. It's not enigmatic, but it's very accessible. The Baruch Hu forgave the sin. Klal Yisrael did not have to suffer that much. But, as we said a moment ago, the Chet HaEgel was something which is a very, very mysterious type of section, and really the only thing that we can try to understand is something, as far as we are concerned, that the Jewish people reach time at Vegas, but even if somebody does reach lofty levels, there's not going to be a constant shira, so he can fall from the summit to the abyss. This is what we learned. Of course, the Farshim already pointed out that we basically say this every day 2 times. In the second section of Kriya Shema, we say, V'oyim Shemaya Tishmu, Kom Nefesh Shenoich Mitzav Eschem Hayoim, V'yavo Es Hashem Elokeichem B'chol Levavchem V'chol Nafshechem. In the second section of Kriya Shema, the Torah tells us, Eidus Ne'emonah, the Torah tells us that it's possible for the Jewish people to reach a level of Avodas Hashem, which is la'avos Hashem Elokeichem b'chol levavchem and b'chol nafshechem, to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu unqualifiedly, with total commitment, with our hearts and with our souls. This is what the Torah tells us, and this is a very positive message, because the Torah indeed has confidence in us that we're capable of reaching the ultimate level. We can climb the summit and reach it. To serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no qualifications whatsoever, total dedication and devotion. to the service of Kadosh Baruch Hu. Nevertheless, right afterwards, when the Torah says Kadosh Baruch Hu will indeed help us, it's not the Kadosh Baruch Hu will give us whatever is necessary in the materialistic world in order to remove all impediments, all obstacles. It's not the reward for mitzvahs, that's only in the world to come. But the Torah sets forth a basically type of hanhaga that a Kadosh Baruch Hu will deal with us, which will remove all impediments and all obstacles, insofar as allowing us to continue with our Meridik and Mesirus Nefesh for Avodas Hashem. And afterwards, the Torah tells you, Shamru Lachem, be very careful. Ben Yifta Levavchem, the Saltem Achelikim Acherim, Sheloi Vishtachvisam Lahem. Be very careful, because in one moment you could fall from a lofty madrega into an abyss. And from Lavos, Hashem Elekechem, B'chol Levavchem, and B'chol Nafshechem, you could come to Sartem, a total detour, and to serve idolatry. So this is the only lesson that we are allowed to learn from this mysterious parish of Chet Egel, that Klal Yisrael simply, for whatever reason it is, we're not careful, we're not diligent on a daily basis with watching themselves meticulously not to fall from that madrega. Be that as it may, afterwards there was beginning of Parshas Vayakel, which was immediately after Yom Kippurim. Kadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe to command the Jewish people to donate everything that's necessary for the building of the Mishkan in the Midbar. And indeed, right after the first day of Sukkot, they started. In the 5-day period, we have two concentrated parshas of the Tzivui of Melechas HaMishkan and the fulfillment of that commandment. In other words, Vayakel Moshe Eso'om was the day after Yom Kippur, 80 days after Klal Yisrael unfortunately committed a grievous Aveira. So we see at the end of Parshas Pekudei, the Ramban says, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu indeed was mashra shchinosa Klal Yisrael. In other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu totally reconciled with the Jewish people, and there was Hashras Hashchina in the Mishkan, which was the forerunner of the Beis HaMikdash. Of course, this was in the Midbar, not in the holiness of Jerusalem, but in the atmosphere of a God-forsaken place, which is the desert, and therefore loftier than that we can't have. Klal Yisrael were totally reunited, and there was a reconciliation between, as we mentioned a moment ago, eternity and temporality. And basically, this is what takes place on every Yom Kippur. We'll speak about that another time. So the question naturally arises, and that's the title of this year, exactly what is the transition that took place in such a short period of time, a matter of 4 or 5 days, a week, no more than that, between estrangement and alienation on the one part, reconciliation, and the element of togetherness between the Jewish people and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the point of departure to explain this will be the famous question of the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh. Vayakel, it says, all the materials that Jewish people donated to the Mishkan were sufficient. Everything that was necessary to build the Mishkan per se, and all the holy vessels, like the Aron that housed the Shtei Luchos HaBris, also the Sefer Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote. We had the Kruvim on top of the Aron. We also have the golden Mizbeach, the golden menorah, all of these kelim were built from the generous, uplifted spirit of the Jewish people that indeed donated everything. So we see that the Torah tells us testimony, Torah testifies, the Torah serves as a witness, and then it says a strange word, v'hoisel, and there was materials that were left over. So the Chaim HaKadosh said these are two opposites. If it was enough, so it wasn't superfluous. And if it's superfluous, so of course it's enough. If somebody has more than he needs to live on, so surely he has enough that's sufficient for him to live on. So the Chaim HaKadosh was bothered by this pasuk. He learns it's two opposites, two mutually exclusive poles. It was sufficient. And on the other hand, it says, V'hoisel, it was left over, there was plenty that was superfluous. So to understand this pasuk and to see exactly what the simple meaning is, we have to, at this juncture, introduce a very famous story in the recent Jewish history. It took place about 100 years ago, a little bit over 100 years ago, probably about 115 to 120 years ago. There was a small Yiddish shtetl, like a suburb of Brisk, that was totally burned down. It was burned down its entirety. The nefashis, the people, by way of miracles and wonders, were all saved. However, the inhabitants of that part of Brisk, on the outskirts of Brisk, were mostly poor people and helpless. And they were without homes in the wintertime. So Chaim Brisker set up a committee that included all the great personages of that generation, including the Chofetz Chaim, the Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, the Achiezer of Vilna, all the Gedolim, and they worked day and night for months to collect the monies needed to restore the homes of these unfortunate people. All the Gedolim, all the Darshanim, all the Rabbanim, all the Askanim worked around the clock, and after 3 months, they succeeded in raising the monies. Afterwards, they send out lists to all the surrounding areas, and everybody should register and explain how many people are in his household and how much money he needs to rebuild the house, etc. In other words, to write down all the details. And Reb Chaim decided that after he would receive all of these lists, which were spread all over the entire area, every single public building and other buildings had these lists, which everybody was required to register on these lists. So Reb Chaim decided that he himself personally would analyze the list, and he would see exactly how much money was needed to be allocated, and he personally allocated the money. It took a few days, and afterwards, Reb Chaim was quite happy that Baruch Hashem, there was enough to go around, and all of a sudden, a poor widow with her orphans appeared, and she asked Reb Chaim to help her out. She also lost her home. So Reb Chaim asked, why does she not submit her name and the family to the listings that went around for a number of months? He explained to her that all the monies had already been allocated and there was nothing left for her. So she cried bitterly with a broken heart and a very bitter soul. So Reb Chaim gave whatever monies he had and whatever monies he could raise immediately to her. However, it did not come close to the money she would have received had she registered for the allocation like everybody else and simply signed up, as they would say colloquially. Reb Chaim was astounded. And his second reaction was that he has a new pshat in the famous story concerning Reb Chaim Volozhin. There was a major Nodiv, very generous man, who contributed and donated a lot of money to Yeshivas Volozhin in those days. And this individual noticed that the Meshulach, the fundraiser of the yeshiva, allowed himself to stay in a luxury hotel and eat in very fancy restaurants and travel in the best accommodations available. So he confronted Reb Chaim Volozhiner and he asked him a simple question: how does he know that his money doesn't go to cover the expenses of the fundraiser? He wants to be a Tamcha D'Oraisa. He wants to support Torah, works hard for his money. He's a rich man. Nevertheless, he wants to gain for himself a status of Tamcha D'Oraisa, people that support Torah. He wants his money to go as directly as possible to the Koilel members and also to the Bachram of the Yeshiva. So Reb Chaim answered very simple. I'll tell you how you know. We see when it came to building the Mishkan, so we have a very, very strange narration. Kadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rei, Korosei b'shem B'tzalel ben Uri ben Chur lemata Yehuda. I have appointed B'tzalel to be the one that will build the Mishkan. How is he going to do it? He'll have a divine spirit, with the entire kaleidoscope of all the wisdoms and knowledge possible. To think thoughts, lasois, bezov, ubekesav, and nefeshes. So Chaim Volozhin said, we would have thought that people that know engineering, builders, would be the ones that would be appointed to build the Mishkan. Why was it necessary to take B'tzalel and bestow upon him such wisdom, lashad machshavos, to think machshavos that perhaps Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have? Very strange narration of Amalei Oisoi, Ruach Elikim. I will fill him with the divine spirit, with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Lashad machshavos, to think all types of thoughts, lasois, bizov, ubikesav nefeshes, to work with the gold, silver, and copper. So, Reb Chaim Volozhin said, obviously, when it came to establishing the Mishkan, building the Mishkan, there were priorities, right? Like the Rishonim said, there was a chelek hazov, said Reb Chaim Volozhin, that was needed for the Aron. That's the place where we had the luchos, the tablets, which were, of course, written with Michtav Elikim. Right? The second luchos, the first luchos that were shattered were there. And also houses, the Sefer Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote. It's called Aron HaKodesh. It's the holy receptacle. And we had the kapeiros, and on top of the kapeiros, we had the kruvim, the cheruvim, and Kadosh Baruch Hu spoke to Moshe from that place. All these were made of gold and silver. So insofar as hierarchy is concerned, priority is concerned, so obviously we all understand that number one is the Aron, number two, the Kruvim, number three, the Menorah, number four, the Mizbeach, all made of gold, and others that are less important. So those are the more important. Then we have over here a type of hierarchies of what's more important or less important. So now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself attests to the reality that B'tzalel will have the Keichas HaNefesh, will have the abilities and capacities to know, insofar as each piece of gold that was contributed, how much of a pure, pristine thought the one that donated it had. Why was that necessary? Because the Torah tells us, "Ve'osu li migdosh, li lishmi." The purpose of the Mishkan and the Midbar, as well as the Beis HaMikdash, the Yikud li truma, li lishmi, has to be done exclusively l'shem mitzvah for Hashras Hashchina. You want HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be your neighbor, so you have to have a pristine, pure machshava to donate the materials necessary for the establishment of the Mishkan in order to facilitate Hashras Hashchina. For other tzedakahs, for other charities, we really don't find it that important, the kavanah l'shma. Of course it's important, but by mikdash, it has to be exclusive. It has to be l'shmi mamish. So therefore, Bezalel needed all the wisdom possible to see with which pure heart the gold was given. Said Reb Chaim Volozhin. Of course, people have different kavanas, different intentions, and we do not know exactly from their actions externally what their internal intentions are. Correct? So Bezalel needed this wisdom and knowledge to ascertain Baruch HaKodesh, which individuals gave with more pure thought and more of a pure heart. And then, as a shatchin, he would measure, right, whoever was number one to the number one priority. That's what Chaim Volozhin explained, the pasuk. We have no other explanation. So he told them as follows. That was once upon a time when we had a Bezalel. Today we don't have a Bezalel. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is the Beichen Levavos, he's the one that knows a person's thoughts. He's a Yodea Machshavos. He knows the purity of the heart and he knows the thought process of the mind. So he will assign the monies, so far as the recipients are concerned, according to the higher level of intention. Kavanah. So if your kavanah is on a higher madrega, you really want to support Torah, you really want to support the Avrechim, the members of the Kailol, so your money will go directly to them. However, if there's some sort of ulterior motivation, you give a lot of money and you'll get a lot of respect, you'll get a lot of publicity for it. So then your kavanah will dictate and mandate that it will go for the expenses of the fundraiser. And we learned already elsewhere that the kavanah of a person is extremely powerful, to the extent that it illuminates Olamos. We'll speak about examples of this another time. So Reb Chaim Brisker said, this is the way the story is brought down. At the end of Chuta Mishulish, we have stories of Reb Chaim Volozhin, and this is the way it's brought down. The power, the dynamic force of a pure, pristine machshava when it comes to doing a mitzvah. So returning now, correct, to the point of departure. So the Grach said, that's not the pshat. Till now we understood, and we have it in front of us, that Betzalel, right, according to Reb Chaim Volozhin, set forth 50 madregas, 50 levels of the materials necessary for the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash, aron, kruvim, etc. All needed a measure of gold. And now he turns his attention to the individuals who donated this gold to see who gave the gold with the purest machshava and gave the different gradations of the donors. And then he has to align and match up the dargis of givers and the materials that were given with the priorities of the Mishkan. Whatever was more of a priority received the zov of the giver who had given with an uplifted spirit and a pure heart. Thus he knew exactly what was needed because he understood that by himself, and he matched up, number one, Keli, insofar as hierarchy and priority is concerned, with the number one giver. So the Graf said that's wrong. That's not the pshat. No, it's not the pshat. That's how it's brought down. However, that's not the explanation. So now the Graf said the meaning is different. Betzalel did not start with an assumption of matching and corresponding the kelim, the vessels of the Mishkan, with the levels of the Divei Leiv. No. But Betzalel knew very well, and that's why he needed Chochmah, Tfuna B'das. This is why he needed it. Exactly how much Lishma was necessary to build the Aron, how much Lishma, vis-a-vis the givers, was necessary to have a menorah, how much Lishma was necessary to have a Mizbeach. In other words, we start with the object itself. We don't have a listing of priorities based on our understanding. The objects themselves, which comprise the Mishkan, each one on its own level, the Cheftze, as they would say in Brisk, required a level of Kedusha V'Taira insofar as the givers were concerned. And since the essential kelim required a level of Kedusha, the Taira, so it was up to Betzalel to attain whether the individuals that donated attained, reached, realized the holiness and sanctity level that was required of the kelim itself. And what would be if Betzalel was fathomed that we need people that donate the Zov, Kesef, and the Choshes with 100% clear intention that it should be exclusively for Hashras HaShechinim, for Kadosh Baruch Hu coming to dwell in our midst, and which should affect a reconciliation. So then it would be used, obviously, for the Aron. However, if no one attained such a level, there would be no Aron. And the Jewish people could not have come to the level that the kelim of the Mishkan requires sanctity of thought, require holiness and purity of the heart. There would be no Mishkan. That's what Reb Chaim said. The kelim, Kedoshim, require that a Jew should be zoicha with his gold that should be used for that specific keli, only if he measures up to the lofty, exalted standards that the kelim require. So that's the pshat. So Reb Chaim Volozhin told that very generous individual, if the darga of the Bnei Torah is on a very high level and they require the monies that the person that donates should match that level, it'll go to them. But if you're not going to be on that level that they require the monies to go, so it will not go to them, it will go to the fundraiser. So Chaim Brisk decided to console this poor widow. And he said, we all worked hard and collected monies from everyone. And everybody gave, no question about it. They were generous, uplifted people. Bale Madrega. However, it would appear from all the Nedivim that there were, all of them, there was no one who had the merit to give with such a pure heart, did not have the merit to give his money with such a pure heart to reach the lofty madrega that you and the orphans have. Because you, in your level of spirituality, are gavoya. Well, this was exactly the words of Reb Chaim Brisk, handed down to Briskerov and to Rebero Brisker. Gavoya, gavoya, lofty upon lofty. And therefore, min hashamayim, they concealed from you the need to register. Because otherwise it's impossible to understand. Everyone whose house was destroyed signed up. Only you? You're the only one. Why? Because there was no one that came close to having the proper intention. Generosity and kindness to help a family that would match and correspond to your level. So they needed a very, very deep neshama and a very, very deep heart. In the meantime, we raised some money. It's not enough. It's not going to cover the expenses. But these are the words of consolation. And min hashamayim, in a short period of time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu directly will make nisim v'nefloyos, wonders and miracles, and you will have enough money to rebuild your home. We're not on that level. There's nobody on that level. HaKadosh Baruch Hu directly will give it to you. After all, he is a Dayan Almonas, Avi Yisayman. He personally will grant you the rest of the money necessary to rebuild your house. And of course, Maran Agriz, the Briskerov, when he repeated this story, said that Chaim was a tzaddik that we don't know of him. We don't know of such a tzaddik, such a Baal Chesed in the history. Perhaps there was somebody bigger, but we don't know of anybody bigger. He was the biggest of all, and therefore he was a tzaddik geyser, like HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mekayim. Chaim was geyser, decreed, and in a short period of time, one of the, I believe it was the Alta of Navardik, bought raffle tickets for her, and in a short period of time, she won the first prize. And we have to know that when it comes to a lottery, the Ramban tells us, whoever is in a lottery, right, a Jewish person, that was direct from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So in a short period of time, she had the money. It was direct from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the story. And the Graf concluded that at this juncture, we can understand Pshat in the pasuk that we started out with. So we said the Chaim HaKadosh asks, if it's more than enough, it's surely enough. So what's the pasuk telling me? So the Chaim answered the Yisayid. Very interesting. This was the answer to the question of what exactly was the transition. Before we conclude, just mention that Blazer Silver, he was the head of Agudas HaRabbonim in America, a member of the Vada Hatzolah during World War II. So he was a Talmud of Reb Chaim Brisker. So he, in his Sefer Anfei Erev, in the introduction, tells us his first experience in Brisk. No, he came to Brisk with a letter from the Rosh Yeshiva that he had learned to apply to learn by Reb Chaim in Volozhin. Very good. So he came to Reb Chaim's house, knocked on the door with a small suitcase. All of a sudden, he was stunned. He saw advertisements plastered on all the walls. He walked a little bit, and he saw anywhere there was a space on the wall. There were no pictures on the wall. There was no paint. It was not painted. You had advertisements of all the store owners and all the upcoming events in Brisk. What was the reason? Because once upon a time, you didn't have newspapers, you didn't have the media. So everyone came to Reb Chaim Brisk. He was the Rav of Brisk. So the people that had stores understood this is the best place to display their advertisements, and so they did. Anyway, he was stunned, amazed, came to the Rebbetzin, and the Rebbetzin said to put his suitcase in their bedroom. Came into the bedroom. Two old people were sleeping there. Homeless people, smelled a mile away, in the bed of Reb Chaim and the Rebbetzin. Finally, he came to see Reb Chaim. So Reb Chaim was holding two little babies, one in each arm with a bottle, and was learning. It was this barrier afterwards that this was once upon a time they didn't have abortions. So anybody that had an illegitimate child would drop it off on the front porch of Reb Chaim's house. And Reb Chaim would take it. Mamzerim, illegitimate children, everybody knew this was the address. So this took place at a Blazer Silver within 10 minutes of his first visit. These were the first three events that took place. This is only symbolic of the great Reb Chaim Brisk, grandson Steif, who was derived at Budapest. Reb Chaim was the greatest goyim in learning that we ever heard of. Could be in Chesed, he was even a bigger goyim. We're just mentioning this parenthetically to understand what was the koyach that he had of Tzadik Geyser, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mekayim in Chesed. He was the proper person to be able to give brachas and make zerus for people to have kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the answer is very good. It was enough. This refers to what? The quality of the thoughts that were necessary for the materials to be established and for the Mishkan to be built. Now, Malacha Hoysa Dayom. Dayom, it was enough, it was sufficient. The Jewish people, through the Siyah slave, Nosoid Liboy, his heart was uplifted. Nodvay Rucha, his spirit was generous. So they reached the Kedusha, the sanctity, and the holiness and the purity of their heart, of real lishma that was necessary for the building of the Mishkan. The hoiser is not in quality of the thoughts of the individuals, but in the quantity of the materials. They gave even more than was enough. That was Reb Chaim's answer. And due to the fact that in a short period of time, the Jewish people could come to pure machshavas, to have a Kadosh Baruch Hu dwell in their midst. Nothing else bothered them. Nothing else concerned them. They just wanted that. So that was the transition from estrangement and alienation to reconciliation with the Jewish people, Kadosh Baruch Hu with the Jewish people, and that is symbolized, like the Vilna Gaon says, with Sukkot that takes place on the calendar right after Yom Kippur, because that is the closeness, that's the element of togetherness between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael.